After having met with ETs dozens of times, Frank knew a lot about life on their home planets. But he was curious about the home planets of ET groups that he had not met. What is life like throughout our galaxy and other galaxies? He decided to find out. He told John, the process was simple. I went deep in meditation, went out of my body, looked at the stars all around me, and picked one that looked interesting. Whenever I thought, I wonder what's in that star system, I instantly teleported there at the speed of thought. Far faster than the speed of light. I went to dozens of stars, maybe 100, and nearly every one had inhabited planets. John asked, do you mean rock and water planets like Earth? Frank responded, some were. But just as in our solar system, there was a wide variety, balls of rock, giant lumps of ice, and huge gas planets. And there was life on every planet that I visited. A wide variety of species just like on Earth. Some planets had life that is far more primitive than on Earth and some far more advanced, with everything in between. John asked him, do you mean life as we know it? Frank said, no, not always. Sometimes it was wildly different. Take, for example, life on the giant gas planets. I saw huge creatures that were ghostly and ethereal. They flapped in slow motion on giant sail-like wings. Or glided around these planets on powerful winds. Some almost looked like manta rays in our oceans, except some were thousands of feet wide, and I could see right through them. They were practically transparent. He paused to see how John was reacting. John shrugged. It sounded weird to him but logical. After all, John thought, there are some bizarre, almost transparent luminous creatures in Earth's deep oceans. So, why not in the air too? Life is incredibly adaptable. Frank continued. After seeing these things on planets around other stars, I wondered whether they were also on Jupiter, Saturn, and Neptune. So, I teleported to those planets and looked around. There they were, similar mantle-like creatures right here in our system. But humans can't see them unless they move up in vibration. They're not going to show up on any NASA cameras. He continued, I didn't check out every planet near Earth, but both the Nordics and Greys told me that there is life on every planet and moon in our solar system. John was surprised and asked, even Venus and Mercury? He knew their surface temperatures are very hot, high enough to melt metals. Frank said, that's what they said. Of course it isn't life as we know it. But then, even on Earth, life is incredibly adaptable. Some bacteria can live in the sub-zero ice sheets. Other varieties can live in the boiling pools of Yellowstone Park. Humans can't live there, but other forms of life can. He continued, now, I wasn't including the different ET races that have bases on the planets and moons in our solar system. Those races aren't native to those planets, they came here from somewhere else. The first time that Frank told him this, John found it hard to believe and asked, every planet? He knew that some were very hot, but others were incredibly cold. Frank replied that the underground and surface bases of the ETs are inside protective enclosures. They also have large orbiting ships around the gas giants, such as Jupiter and Saturn. John still found it hard to believe that the ETs could withstand the extreme surface temperatures on those planets. None are at all like Earth. He did an internet search and found that Martian surface temperatures are about -80 degrees Fahrenheit or -60 degrees Celsius. Venus has average surface temperatures of +860 degrees Fahrenheit or 460 degrees Celsius, and Saturn is at -290 degrees Fahrenheit or -180 degrees Celsius. These temperatures would be lethal for humans. John asked Frank about that extreme range. Frank said, you forget about deep space, it's at absolute zero of -454 degrees Fahrenheit or -270 degrees Celsius. The ETs don't have any problem with those temperatures, so why would a freezing planet bother them? Their technology shields them. John was still skeptical and asked, I can understand that the government might cover up bases on other planets, but amateur astronomers have taken hundreds of photos of nearby planets. Why don't they see the bases? Frank said, the Nordics told me that some bases are underground, and the ones on the surface are simply invisible to us. Earth people are not ready to accept ET civilizations, and so they hide their bases. If they don't want our telescopes to see them, they won't. John asked, okay. If they are invisible, does that mean they are here from a non-physical universe? Frank responded, I wondered the same thing. They told me that they are from the same physical universe as we are. Except they normally function at a higher vibration. It's a little like dark matter. Scientists say that dark matter and dark energy make up about 70% of the universe, but we can't see either of them. Even so, they affect all the galaxies. But to us, they're invisible. Intrigued, John asked, wild question. Do you think the ETs are made of dark matter? Frank said, I never asked, but I don't think so. John went on, invisibility is one of the hardest things to understand. How is it possible that a ship can be visible 1 second, and gone the next? The same with the ETs themselves. They can vanish in a heartbeat. What's going on? Frank said, 2 ways they do that. One is harder to understand. They teleport. The ETs say that they simply take atoms apart and reassemble them somewhere else. Frankly, I don't know exactly how they do it, but it makes sense. We take atoms apart in Earth's giant particle accelerators. You know, those giant ring-like tubes that bring together 2 opposing particle beams at nearly the speed of light. When the particles collide, the atoms get destroyed and fly apart so that we can see all the pieces. Of course, the ETs have learned how to do the same thing but much less destructively. Frank continued, the other way is simpler to understand, bending light. Usually, photons bounce off matter to make it visible, right? Well, the ETs simply bend light around the ship to make it invisible. John added, yeah, I heard that the military is working on something similar using fiber optic cables. They channel light around a tank to try to make it invisible. However, it doesn't work very well yet, based on some photos I saw. Frank responded, well, the ETs don't use fiber optics. You know that light bends when it passes close to a massive object like a black hole or galaxy. Well, they do something like that. They use the ship's anti-gravity to bend light. Let's call them light rays for simplicity. They bend a light ray around a ship and then straighten it out and let it keep going. They do the same thing to every single one of the millions of light rays that could reflect off a ship. No matter what direction the rays come from, they bend them around the ship and send them off in the same direction. So, if no light ray ever reflects off the ship, then the ship effectively disappears. With bending light, the ship is still there but appears invisible. With teleportation, the ship is somewhere else and so, really is invisible. John was curious and asked, can they still see us when we can't see them? Frank replied, when they bend light, they can, because they are still here. When they teleport, they can't, because they are somewhere else.